Okay, so um, welcome to class. This is English. You'll know you're in English. You see my picture. You want to make sure you're looking at this materials tab. You'll find your assignment inside here in Monday 4-6. You just open this up, and inside that assignment, you'll find the directions on what to do. You'll find a link to the book that you can download for yourself, the entire book of The Hate You Give. You'll find a link to this video, and you'll find a link to the second video, which is me doing an instructional read aloud of chapter 2 of The Hate You Give. If you missed and you feel like you're behind, do feel free to go back to your whole course and go back to assignments we did last week. All right, so we did chapter 1 here in this assignment, and there's all these other assignments. You can complete as much work as you want. There's no problem, no problem with going back, okay? But you do want to probably catch up to us so that when we move forward, you can see we did chapter 1 last week. We're going to do chapter 2 today. We're moving forward with this book, and the writing assignment's going to be on more of the book. So catch up with us on that. That's more important than the other assignments if you want to stay with us. All right, so for today, when you do open up this handout, this is what you'll see. The Hate You Give, chapter 2. Directions. Review the video lesson. That's what you're doing right now. You're watching this. The PowerPoint is linked here, right, down here. So the PowerPoint I'm about to show you, you'll see. And take notes in your notebook, right? You can just keep that at home for your reference. Hopefully you have some kind of notebook or piece of paper that you've got that you can just keep for yourself so that you've got references. And then we're going to read chapter 2 of The Hate You Give by Angie Thomas. I should have put that in italics. I'll do it now. And complete the questions below. I'm giving you a literary term here, flashback. It's a literary term that refers to when an author takes you back in time to show you something that already happened. And so the signpost we're going to use today is the memory moment, right? And so a memory moment is when you stop and notice a note. You're reading along, and the author interrupts the forward motion of the action to go back and tell you a memory. You should always stop when you notice this and ask yourself, why might this memory be important, right? Why might this memory be important? You want to write that down. Why might this memory be important? And the thing about the memory is it's often going to tell you about the theme, the conflict, or it might foreshadow what's going to happen next. Okay? So after you get the lesson, after you've read the chapter, you'll answer these 3 questions. One is a schema connecting question, which is connecting you to your own experience. The other 2 you should be able to answer after you finish this lesson. All right, so what is literary conflict? Let's go through this. Literary conflict is a literary device or term. There are 2 kinds. It can either be external or internal. External conflict takes place outside of the body, while internal conflict takes place inside the body and mind. All right, 3 types of external conflict. First kind we call person versus person. It's the most straightforward type of conflict. It pits the protagonist, main character, directly against another character with apparently opposing aims, right? So fighting each other. Think every good guy and bad guy you've ever seen in any superhero movie. Think Cinderella and the Wicked Stepmother. Think just, yeah, Superman and what the guy with the kryptonite. All of them, right? Lex Luthor, I think it is, in Superman. Batman and the Joker. All right, another external conflict is person versus nature. This type of conflict pits a story's main character or characters against a natural force, such as a flood, a predatory animal, or a disease epidemic. If someone was going to write the fictional story of what's happening right now in the world, it would be a person versus nature story, because we are all facing this coronavirus pandemic, and that is nature out to get us. But also stories like Hatchet, where he's surviving in the wilderness, could be person versus nature. Another type of external conflict is person versus society. In many stories, the protagonist battles an unjust element of government or the culture. So, for instance, The Hunger Games, or Divergent, or The Maze Runner. all these stories, the main character is really up against like an evil society, not just another person. All right, but there's only one type of internal conflict. That is person versus self. Some literary conflicts take the form of a character struggling to overcome fear, addiction, emotional damage, or some other crippling personal issue they're really struggling with. 13 Reasons Why would be an example of person versus self, right? Where she's got the suicidology and then he's listening to the tapes about it and having all his feelings, and it's all inside feelings. Even though there are external conflicts as well, the main story is about the internal one. All right, let's do some practice. I'll give you a chance to think for a second. Maybe you should write down what you think they are and then check yourself at the end, okay? So, number one, what do you think? Number two, what do you think? Number three, what do you think? 4. Again, if I'm going too fast, just pause it. 5. 6. This one's a funny one. 7. And 8. All right, so those are the visual ones, right? 1 through 8, visual ones. Before we move on, I'll just give you the answers. So hopefully you wrote those down and you want to check yourself. For the visual ones that we just did, this is person versus nature. This is person versus society. Person versus person. Person versus society. Person versus person, self. Person versus nature. Person versus society. And person versus person. All right, let's try again, this time without pictures. We're going to try some text. Number 9, what do we think? Again, write down your answers and then check yourself at the end. If she only had proceeded more slowly, if she had only taken the southerly route, avoiding the icebergs, if only the watch had had a pair of binoculars. 10. Again, if I'm going too fast, just pause. Charles decided to break all the rules that day, the day he decided to steal that car. He was immediately arrested and sent to jail to await his trial. He should have known better than to mess with the rules. 11. I don't care who you talk to, screamed Sarah to West. I just wish I'd never met you. 12. After lowering himself into the damp and dark cave, Tom began to reprimand himself for not having replaced his flashlight batteries. Tom's terror slowly began to take over as the light around him grew dimmer and dimmer and dimmer. 13. After the light in the cave was completely gone, Tom began to stumble through the cave blindly, cutting his hands on what appeared to be sharp rocks. 14. Tom found a dry spot to sit down in the dark and began to obsess over an argument he'd had earlier in the day with his mother, in which he'd said, "I hope I never see you again." 15. Tom's mother was upset that he wanted to skip going to college in order to go spelunking in all of the world's greatest caves before he turned 30. Tom didn't understand the big deal. He didn't really believe in structured learning anyway. All right. So what do we think? I will give you some answers. Number 9, person versus nature. Number 10, society. Number 11, person versus person. Number 12, person versus self. Number 13, person versus nature. Number 14, person versus person. And number 15, person versus society. All right, hopefully you have a good understanding of literary conflict and you can read chapter 2 looking for what is the conflict of chapter 2. Hint, the memory moment's going to help.